After one of the hottest Grand Prix of the year, it wasn't just the Singapore asphalt that was burning, but also the internet. Oscar Piastri, the young Australian title contender, suddenly found himself at the center of a controversy that had less to do with his driving performance than with an alleged gesture, or rather the lack of one. Social media exploded with videos, memes, and headlines. Piastri ignores Zach Brown. McLaren in chaos after teammate collision. Is this the beginning of the break? But as is often the case in Formula One, the truth lies between the images, and sometimes footage simply doesn't show what really happened. Subscribe now to not miss any of the hidden truths from the F1 paddock. This is about facts, not headlines. What had happened? After a turbulent race that began with an internal duel between Piastri and Norris, the Australian parked in fourth in Parc Fermé. It was an evening that should have celebrated McLaren's triumph, the second consecutive constructors' title. But the scenes after the race triggered more discussions than the success itself. While Zach Brown was congratulating his drivers, Piastri seemed to miss him. The cameras caught the moment. Brown approached him, said, "Oscar, back-to-back champions. Good race, tough race, thank you for..." And then nothing. Piastri turned away, took off his helmet without answering. The internet did what it does best: interpret, exaggerate, speculate. What looked like an affront to many was actually a misunderstanding. As PlanetF1.com later reported, Piastri simply hadn't heard anything. The thunderous volume of the fireworks, the cheering fans, and the roar of the engine drowned out Brown's words. He was exhausted, drenched in sweat, in the adrenaline rush of a 62-lap marathon, and simply not in conversation mode. But in the world of Formula One, it's not always the truth that counts, but the impression. And this moment fit perfectly into the narrative that has been building around McLaren for weeks. Two drivers, one title, and a tension that is slowly turning into rivalry. The situation was already explosive. On the first lap of the race, there was contact between the two McLaren drivers when Norris tried to avoid Max Verstappen, and in doing so, crashed directly into his teammate's car. Piastri, who had started third, suddenly saw his own wing splinter and had to fight to even stay within reach of the leading group. On the radio, he vented his anger. "If you want to avoid another car by crashing into your teammate, that's a pretty damn bad job of avoiding," he growled toward engineer Tom Stallard. A statement that immediately went viral because it showed that the usually calm Australian is losing his patience. But McLaren remained calm. No penalty, no blame assignment, no internal consequences. The incident was explained as a racing incident. For Piastri, however, this was a bitter pill. He had the better start, the better rhythm, and lost not only the podium position, but also important points in the championship battle through his teammate's mistake. In the end, Norris finished third, Piastri fourth, 3 points less in the standings, and a race that felt like a defeat for the Australian. When he stood in the media zone after the race behind Carlos Sainz and in front of the running television screens, viewers noticed something. McLaren was celebrating the title in the background, but Piastri wasn't there. Immediately, theories exploded. He's boycotting the team. He refuses to celebrate. And once again, the internet burned. But this too, as it turned out, was a misinterpretation. While Piastri was waiting for his interview slot, Lando Norris was in the official press conference. Both drivers were at different places at the same time, simply because of a poorly timed media schedule. Neither boycott nor defiance, just poor coordination. Half an hour later, both were reunited. McLaren published a photo showing the entire team celebrating, the drivers side by side. The caption, "Respect." A short but meaningful message, and a quiet attempt to put out the fire before it spreads. Nevertheless, an aftertaste remains. Piastri's behavior may be explainable, but the pattern is clear. Emotions that simmer. A team working at the limit. A championship battle that frays nerves. McLaren has the perfect car, but the human balance is wavering. Oscar Piastri himself admitted this. After the race, he said, "Obviously, there were some difficult situations for the whole team. We talked about it. Sure, some things could have gone better. But ultimately, this is a learning process. For all of us." It was the controlled language of a man who knows every word carries weight. But between the lines, you could feel the tension. Formula One is not a fairy tale. It's politics on wheels, and McLaren is at the center of a new power struggle. What began in Singapore was more than a racing incident. It was an unmistakable crack in McLaren's perfectly polished paint. Under the glaring lights of the Marina Bay Street circuit, something showed that had only been suspected until now. The tension between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris is real, and it grows with every race, every point, every microphone. McLaren has achieved in the last 2 years what many teams thought impossible, dethroning Red Bull. But success has a price. When a team reaches the summit, the biggest enemy is no longer the competition, but one's own ego. Piastri and Norris, once celebrated as a perfectly harmonious duo, now stand at the limit of what sporting rivalry can endure. The race in Singapore was symbolic of this creeping break. Lando Norris fought desperately for his last chance in the title race. Piastri wanted to defend his lead, and neither backed down. The contact at turn 7 was no accident, but the product of two drivers who give each other nothing. McLaren explained the incident routinely as a racing incident. But internally, sources from Woking report, the mood was anything but calm. Zach Brown and Andrea Stella know they're sitting on a powder keg. Both drivers are young, ambitious, and extremely fast. Both believe they should lead the team, but only one will win the title in the end, and the other will become history. Oscar Piastri has proven this season that he is more than just the quiet Australian. His anger over the incident with Norris, his radio message, that was no slip, but a sign. For the first time, he has publicly drawn his line. And that's exactly what changes the balance of power. In the past, Norris was considered the team favorite, charismatic, humorous, British. Piastri, on the other hand, was the silent precision machine, the perfect counterweight. But in Singapore, it was shown that he too has a voice. A dangerously clear, ice-cold voice that McLaren cannot ignore. Behind the scenes, discussions have long been underway about how the team should handle this rivalry. Andrea Stella knows that too much control suffocates the drivers, but too little discipline can cost the title. It's a balancing act where every sentence counts. Especially after rumors emerged in Singapore that Piastri had intentionally avoided the team, a narrative that immediately exploded in the media. He reacted diplomatically. Obviously, some things could have gone better, but we're all learning. But those who listen carefully hear the subtext, I trust you, but only up to here. For McLaren, the timing of this incident is devastating. While the team is close to securing the constructors' title, the harmony between its drivers threatens to break. Right now, when Red Bull with Verstappen is strong again. The victory in Baku, the pace in Monza, the confidence in the team all indicate that the second half of the season won't be a walk in the park. And then there's the public factor. Every look, every word, every gesture is analyzed. The scene in Parc Fermé, the alleged ignore moment, was harmless. But it became a symbol of distance, of distrust, of what must never become visible in a top team. Norris himself appears relaxed, but he too knows his role is changing. For a long time, he was considered the undisputed team leader. Now, Piastri leads the championship, and that scratches at self-perception. Norris has publicly emphasized several times that he has no problem with Oscar, but everyone says that before it becomes a problem. Within the team structure, it's Stella who tries to maintain control. The engineer, the psychologist, the strategist, he often speaks of collective strength and mutual respect. But the closer the season finale gets, the more it shows that McLaren is keeping two alpha males in one cage. For Piastri, the situation is doubly delicate. On the one hand, he wants the title. On the other hand, he knows his reputation as a team player is at stake. Just a year ago, he was considered the new Rosberg. Analytical, cold, methodical. Now one sees in him a man ready to risk whatever is necessary for victory. The irony? That's exactly what makes him dangerous and irreplaceable. McLaren thus finds itself at a point that Red Bull already knew. When two top drivers fight for the same prize, eventually the team loses. But Brown seems determined to attempt the balancing act. He knows that rivalry doesn't have to be a disadvantage as long as it remains productive. But the internet, the press, the fans, they've all already passed their judgment. Every look between Norris and Piastri is now interpreted. Every radio quote is dissected. every shoulder pat becomes a headline. At the end of the day, Singapore was neither a victory nor a disaster. It was a turning point. The moment when Oscar Piastri went from student to opponent. The moment when McLaren realized that the toughest opponent isn't called Red Bull, but sits in their own camp. The title fight may still last 7 races,